Hey folks, welcome to Conversations with Curtis. My name is Morgan Stetler. I am your host, and today my guest is actor Brad Greenquist. You will recognize Brad as the character of Georg, the Wagnerian scholar and conductor in Gabriel Night 2, The Beast Within. He is best known for playing Victor Pascoe in Pet Sematary, and he's had an incredible career ever since. But what I wanted to talk to him about was the fact that he was the original Curtis Craig. He was offered the role of Curtis in Phantasmagoria 2, and he turned it down. And all these years I've wondered why. And also to thank him for turning it down so I could step in and play that character. So we finally get to the bottom of this. It's a great interview. In fact, I probably said this before, but I think this is really true. This, I feel like, is the best, most fun interview I've done so far. He's such an interesting guy, super smart, incredibly generous and ingratiating. And we just had a great time talking. And I am very excited to share it with you right now. So please enjoy my interview with actor Brad Greenquist. Brad Greenquist, welcome to Conversations with Curtis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it is a pleasure to finally meet you. How you doing? How's your summer going?
Summer's going fine. It's I've been busy, so everything's good, and it's not as hot down here in Los Angeles as it is elsewhere in the country. So
yeah. How long have you been in LA now?
Oh man, since 91.
Since 91.
Mm-hmm.
And how many different places have you lived in that time?
Actually, only 2.
Whoa, really?
Yes.
Wow.
My wife and I moved here from New York, and we first had an apartment in Brentwood, and then we bought a condo in Santa Monica.
I love Santa Monica.
When it was
That's great.
still affordable.
Yeah, you got there at the right time for sure.
Yeah, so we get these ocean breezes. It's nice. It's nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that. I
close.
lived down there, and I lived in Westwood from 97 to like 2001, and was spent a lot of time down in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's changed so much
Yes, it's changing a lot right now. It's there's a lot of development, and it's unfortunate because a lot of the independent businesses are being shoved out.
Yeah,
and,
everywhere.
So it's not the little town that it was. It's become
I know
a little bit more like Vegas or something.
It was already becoming that with the promenade and all that back in the day. I'm sure that's even crazier. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, it is such a pleasure to meet you. You not only are you a tremendously successful actor, for the past 30 years, you've appeared in dozens of films and television, and you do tons of theater, which is one of my dearest loves, and I love that you continue to do that. But my audience, the folks who will be primarily watching this interview today, will recognize you immediately for your role as Georg Immerding in Gabriel Night 2, A Beast Within. And I just have to start by sharing with you a little blast from the past here. So this is, let me find it right here. There we are. Do you see that?
Yes.
There's Georg from Beast Within, and then here's you. You were the Wagnerian expert.
Yeah,
who unveils the lost Wagnerian opera, which you ultimately conduct later in the game.
I've never seen these.
That's great. Well, I don't have too much, unfortunately, but these are the 2 that I can share at the moment. We're going to talk more about your experience on Gabriel Night in a bit, but just seeing this picture or either of these pictures, is there any memory that immediately jumps to mind?
Well, first of all, after shooting that, they sent me a copy of the game, and I tried really hard, but I couldn't get out of the first chapter. I just couldn't.
No, I got to tell you, I part of my. So you've never played the game, never saw any footage?
No, I never saw it. I couldn't advance. I'm really bad at that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I do remember, when I was in high school, I took a music theory class, which was great. It was amazing. And I wasn't a musician, but I took this music theory class. And one of the things we learned was how to conduct. And so it all came back when I had to conduct that, because I knew the basics of conducting, and I practiced on um, Dvorak's New World Symphony.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just played that
great.
recording over and over, and knew how to conduct, at least in that time, and how to cue the instruments and all of that. And that was very helpful for when.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in a bit. Now, the reason that I'm most excited to talk to you, and again, we'll talk about this in a little more in a minute, is if I'm not mistaken, shortly after Gabriel Night, the following year, they produced the second in a series that they had created they did a game called Phantasmagoria, sort of a haunted house horror game. Yes. And then they had a follow-up called Phantasmagoria Puzzle of Flesh. You had just done Gabriel Night, and my understanding, if this is correct, is that you were offered the role of Curtis Craig, but for whatever reason, were unable to do that. Is that true? Yes, that's true. Well, I just want to say 26 years later, thank you for turning that down. That was a very generous gift of yours.
Was it a good gig? Was it fun? Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was tremendous fun. And I felt like, I was just out of grad school. I was 2 years. I got into acting, I committed to it late. I was pushing 30 by the time I finished grad school. And so I felt like I had a lot of making up to do. I was feeling very old, as an almost 30-year-old. And so this gig came up about 4 years. I moved to Seattle sort of as a way to get my equity card, a small city, so I could kind of get all my stuff in order before I moved to New York or LA. And this came along kind of very quickly. I think in part because I'm not sure if you said yes and had to back out. Do you remember what the story was behind that?
Yes, it's a rather complex story, actually. Do you want to hear it right now?
Maybe not. Let's hold on that in just a second. But my whole idea, it was a great idea. So ultimately, I had a few theater credits. I was hardly any film. And so this was a 6-month SAG shoot. I was in every single scene. And the nice thing about this compared to what you had to deal with Gabriel Knight was they decided to get away from green screen or blue screen, and they built sets. So everything that I got to work on what felt like a movie set, and we did locations. And so I just felt like every day I was being paid to learn how to act in front of a camera. I don't know if I always did. I look at some of the footage and I cringe, but I think we always do that. But it was a really fascinating experience. So thank you for that. But
yes,
before we get into that, I just want to backtrack a little bit and get a little sense of, or who you are and where you came from. I've done a little bit of reading up on you, and I know that your dad was in the Army. You grew up kind of bouncing around as a kid but you ended up settling down for the most part for your formative years in Falls Church, Virginia. Is that right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about Falls Church. What was it like being a child of a military man, and how was that?
Well, those first several years of my life, first 6 or 8 years, we were, it was a year here, a year there, moving around a lot. And then we kind of stayed in Falls Church, as it turned out, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. And, kind of, we lived in not on a base, but in kind of a military neighborhood, and I went to school, et cetera, et cetera. And in there, I got very interested in horror movies. First of all, those old Universal Gothic movies, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Werewolf, Dracula, all of those. Just gobbled them up, and then that moved into, like, once I'd seen all of those like 20 times, then it went into those Japanese monster movies. And Rodan and all of those.
War of the Gargantuas. That was one of my favorites.
War of the Gargantuas. That was one of my favorites. And then that morphed into those sci-fi, those sci-fi things that would air on TV on Saturday afternoons. You know, all those flying saucer movies. You know, so you know, I was kind of really obsessed with all of that, and then in 1972, that obsession flipped because Charlie Chaplin came back to the United States to accept an honorary
That's right.
Oscar,
I remember
and
that.
they showed a Gold Rush, the Gold Rush on television, and I laughed so hard, and suddenly, like, my whole obsession switched to silent comedies, Charlie
Oh,
Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd. And in Washington, D.C., there was the AFI had a theater in the Kennedy Center, and they would show a lot of these films. So a lot of these silent films, and they would do, you know, they'd had an organ there, and they'd have an organist playing. And so a lot of these silent films, I saw like restored prints of
oh
things that
man.
hadn't been seen in years and years and
Yeah.
years. And it was just magic.
I gotta say, the General, Buster Keaton's The General, to me is probably the greatest movie ever made. I
Yeah,
think that is just it, every single frame, the things that the stunts that he's able to do in one take is
yeah,
just mind-boggling. So yeah,
yeah.
I love. He's my
You know,
favorite.
all of those guys. Earlier this year, I took my whole family up to Oakland to see a screening of Chaplin's City Lights
Oh yeah.
in a theater. It was through the San Francisco Silent Film Festival, and it was a 3,000 seat Art Deco theater, sold out, with a live orchestra,
Oh, I
50
love
piece
it.
orchestra, and some of those shots in I've seen City Lights so many times, but I hadn't seen it on a big screen in so long. Some of those shots, he's got this scene, a boxing scene,
Yeah.
stunt after stunt,
Yeah.
and there is no cut.
Hiding behind the ump, right? They're dancing.
Yes, yes, that
Yeah,
whole thing, this big
yeah.
dance that goes on and on like a vaudeville act. And what I found amazing, really amazing, was how you'd have a gag, and the camera would like just shift a little bit, so that the camera was, you know, it was moving. It wasn't just setting. It was like kind of moving back and forth to keep the action. And there would be a gag, and the whole audience would erupt into laughter. And just as that laughter was starting to die down, boom, the next gag,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And on without a cut. I
Yeah.
mean, it's brilliant, and it's a skill that nobody has anymore.
No, you're right. You're right. It's yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I
Yeah,
can't think of the last time I got those kind of laughs in any kind of,
right.
modern comedy.
Yeah,
Just that
yeah.
not like
So
that.
I was just obsessed with all of that, and I still have a great affection for both that and the horror movies. You
So
know,
you come from, so you ultimately decide, and it seems like your career started fairly early. So you made the choice to be an actor. When did you make that choice? When did
well,
you?
actually, I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a movie director. I made a film. See, when I was 17, I made a silent comedy film, Super 8, black and white,
That's great.
silent chase comedy. You know, it was like it was a half hour long, and I submitted it to a film festival in Washington, D.C., and I won. I got grand prize and the best acting award.
Wow,
It was
17.
just a
That's
bunch of stunts. There was no
no.
acting. It was a bunch of stunts, but it was, you know, I learned how to edit, and because I'd seen so many of these films, I knew the framing. I knew how to keep the camera back. I knew how to film all these stunts, and I knew how to cut it. I had this feeling for cutting it, you know. So yeah, I got this, you know, first place. So I guess I'm an award-winning filmmaker.
Yeah, right.
I was 17,
Does
man.
that movie exist
Um,
anywhere?
yeah, I've still got a print of it.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got to get it. You
I've
got to
had
get
it.
it digitized. You got to get it
Yeah,
out
I've had
there.
it digitized, but I gotta, you know, I think it needs a bit of fine tuning, which would be fun to do, but
Oh
when
yeah.
I have time. So then I thought, well, I want to be a director, and I thought, okay, well, so if you're directing a movie, you have a cinematographer who knows how to do the shots. You have art directors, you have a screenwriter, you have an editor, but a director needs to work with the actors. There's no one else who's going to work with the actors. So I thought, well, I should learn acting so that I know how to direct actors.
Okay.
And I thought my scheme was, and, I was like, at that time I was 19, and I was like, okay, I'll learn acting. Once I get this acting thing down, then I'll switch to directing, right? But I'm not quite there yet.
Another couple more years. You're close. Yeah.
So close.
Oh, that's great. Now, what was it like? How did your parents feel about you choosing that career?
Well, they supported me, but they were anxious about it, but they didn't stand in my way. But they would, wouldn't you rather, blah, blah, blah. And everything else was so boring, boring. Because I didn't have any other skills. I was kind of mediocre in school, except in music theory, and eventually I was in I took one drama class, and that's where I excelled. Everything else I was very average, and I could not stand being average. And I it was either do something in the movie or theater industries, or I would be unloading trucks for the rest of my life, and that was not a future I wanted. So, but the problem is I had to learn everything. I had no talent for acting, none. Oh, I've lost your audio.
There I am. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, that I guess I could say I beg to differ, because your work early on was so clean and precise. Certainly the stuff that I've been able to, see clips and such.
I started with mime. I started with mime. I thought, I'll be a mime.
That'll get you. That'll get you away from the truck unloading.
Right. And I would go into DC. The first time I went into DC with a friend of mine who was a mime as well, and he kind of like taught me how to do this. And we did this street mime in this courtyard, and it was wildly successful. I mean, people were giving us money and all this, and so I saved. When afterwards we went back to my car and we split up the money, and I had the presence of mind to save one of those dollar bills, and I put it into a book. I had a book about Marcel Marceau, the French mime.
Yeah.
And I put that dollar in there, but then I forgot about it. And years later, when my kids were toddlers, one of them was climbing the bookcase and grabbed that book, and it fell off the bookcase and opened up to that page, and there was that dollar. This was like 30 years later, and I knew exactly what that dollar was. The first dollar I ever made performing.
That's awesome.
I took that dollar, and it's now framed on my wall. I see it every day.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love it.
But no, I didn't know anything. I had to learn everything about performing. My family was not an extroverted in any way.
Right.
It's more turned inward, and they're a little bit depressed, I think. So I had to learn all of it. Yeah. I had no natural talent, but I did have a commitment.
That's fantastic. And then, so, from, again, I'll just sort of throw some stuff out there, but it sounds like you had, once you did make that commitment, moved to New York, you had a pretty quick string of successes from what I can read. It sounds like you got a Broadway show.
Without an agent. I didn't even have an agent.
See, that's stunning. So 1985, around there, right? Yeah. So what's the story behind that?
Yes, that was, I didn't have an agent. I'd been in New York for a year. I'd gone to Virginia Commonwealth University and gotten a degree. They had a really good professional program, BFA program there. Okay. It was really terrific. So, but then I was in New York. I'd been there a year, and I just went to an EPA, Equity Principal audition.
Yeah.
Which, for your viewers, it's where it's kind of a cattle call. You just
stand in line. Yep. Do your monologue.
Get there at like 6 a.m. They open the doors at 9. You sign up, and then, but there was some misprint in the papers or something, and I was the only one there that day. Yeah, there was the time changed, and I had some auditions. They just wanted a monologue, and I had some that I was really good at, and I did this one, and they said, "Oh, that's great." And then I like just sent postcards into the casting director every week, and then after like 2 months, there was nothing, so I stopped. And then I got this phone call. "Oh, yes, could you come in and audition for the director? And could you sing a German song?" Okay. So anyway, then I booked
Now, the
this.
beginning of your German characters.
Yeah, yeah. So I booked this Broadway show, but it bombed out of town, unfortunately. We
Oh,
closed in Baltimore.
well, I have a picture here. So this is from your show.
Yes,
This is
yes.
you
Uh-huh.
standing in front. Look at this young kid. How old are you there? You got to be 24,
I was
25.
I was 25. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes. And so here's the interesting thing. Michael Moriarty, one of the stars, was my teacher.
Oh, wow.
I was
Great actor.
training
I
with him.
love that guy. I
Yeah,
remember Bang the Drum Slowly. I love that movie. He was so good in
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But he didn't know that I was auditioning. He had no idea until, the read through, the script read through. I was like walked in the door and he was there. What are you doing here?
That's fantastic.
So that was pretty great. Yes.
And
And
Eileen Brennan. Well, look at this.
Eileen Brennan,
Yeah.
Jean Moreau, it was her people doing this. This was to be her Broadway debut.
It just didn't work out.
No, it didn't work out. And Roy Dotrice was like, he was amazing. He played Nono, the 99-year-old man.
Oh, wow.
And he was so generous. I was always asking him questions about his makeup because he was in his 40s, I think. And he invited me into his dressing room and said, "Bring your camera and I will show you every single step of the way what I'm doing." And I did. I've got 200 pictures
Oh, wow.
of Roy Dotrice putting on all of his makeup, the
Well,
sculpt.
that was helpful because you've done a lot of makeup in your day with
Yeah.
numerous.
But it was so generous of him to let me do this.
Oh, that's great.
Quite a big
That's great.
star. So for me, it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Even though we closed out of town.
Well, it didn't sound like it took long for you to bounce back. So in '87, you book a big, back to back, you book two very big roles in major motion pictures. One as let's see, what's the character's name? In Bedroom Window, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bedroom Window starring Steve Guttenberg and
Elizabeth McGovern.
Let me see if I can. Yeah, Isabelle Huppert. I remember watching this film when I remember when it first came out. Gutenberg was getting pretty big at the time, right? He was starting to, I think he had just done Diner and things like that. And
yes. And
so this was him kind of going in.
Yeah.
So you play the creepy guy who gets caught doing something, attacking Elizabeth McGovern.
Women. Yeah. Stalking and attacking women. Yeah.
Right. And then they see you outside the window, and then he pretends to try to protect his lover. He pretends to be the one who saw it, but gets, and so then you go after them. But that's so then shortly after that, you book Pet Sematary.
Yes.
And what was the character's name?
Pascal, Victor Pascal.
Victor Pascal. So my son and I, my 13-year-old son, in prep for talking to you today, we watched the movie last night. Or 2 nights ago. Right. And so it's very fresh in my memory. And you did a fantastic job. And there's another picture here, and then I'll just kind of talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, just so you go from being in, you're in New York, you get a gig that looks like it's going to get you somewhere. It tanks out of town. You're probably going on auditions. You must have an agent at this point because
No, I still didn't. Well, I did. Here's what happened. Okay,
how did these...
Night at the Iguana, that was in the fall of '85. Came back, in November to New York. In January, I went out of town to do a show, to do Fool for Love in Richmond. Some friends of mine were doing it there. So I went there and did that play. Came back, still didn't have an agent. Then I did a little class project that I'd been working on in Michael Moriarty's class, a truncated production of Richard III, Shakespeare. And I managed to get an assistant agent to come and watch. And the next morning, I got a phone call from the head of the agency saying, Brad, my assistant was there last night to see your show, and he says you were pretty good. Could you come on in? I'd like to talk to you. So I went in like the next day, and and he said, and you bring 2 monologues, right? Because that's what you did in those days, right?
Yeah.
So I went in, and he said, well, it's good to meet you. My assistant was really, really thrilled with your performance. So you have a monologue. So I did a monologue, and he said, oh, that was great. Do you have another one? I said, sure. Did another one. And then he said, you have another one? And I said, sure. I did another one. He said, you got another one? I said, yeah. And I did about, I think, maybe 12 monologues for him.
Jeez.
And I had another 12 that I could have done. I just had like 20 some speeches from plays that I could do.
Right.
Like that, right?
Wow.
That's what we did in Michael Moriarty's class. That's part of it. He really prepared you to work as an actor, because he was an actor. So then they signed me, and my first audition through them was for The Bedroom Window. And that took, again, I auditioned, and then I met the director, Curtis Hanson. It was before he was so well known, and then didn't hear anything for several weeks, and I thought it was over, and then poof, I got it.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And the next day, I was in. I got the call at 7 o'clock on a Thursday. They said, "Okay, you booked the movie." Oh no, it was in the morning. It was in the morning on a Friday morning, I think. I don't remember what day, but it was in the morning, and I went to my agent's office and fell on the floor crying because I was so happy. And then the next day, I was in North Carolina shooting.
Wow. Oh,
and
man.
I was on it for 9 weeks, and that was great. And then Pet Sematary, actually, see, then I didn't book much of anything for the rest of that year. A lot of auditions. I didn't book anything. And then that was in 85, 86, the movie came out, right? And The Bedroom Window. And then in 87, I booked Pet Sematary. And that was funny because my agent, he negotiated the deal on a Friday night when he had his weekly poker game.
Oh, God.
And he was not stopping his poker game to do the deal.
Yeah.
And, he was, but because he was like playing poker and, doing all that, he got me a really good deal.
That's great. He was in that mode. He was in the zone at the moment.
Yes,
that's great.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you only have a little bit because you have a rehearsal today. So I don't want to, I've got so many questions about.
Well, we can go till 1:15.
Perfect. Okay.
By then I'll have to
Okay,
go.
great. So yeah, you get these 2 great gigs back to back. I want to, having watched the movie the other night, the one question that my son came up with, and maybe we missed something, but your character becomes sort of the good. He's the good ghost. He's the ghost who's trying to warn about overindulging in this realm, and because it's going to come back to haunt you. But what we missed is what was Victor's connection to the Pet Sematary. So how he comes in as an ER case who's been, I don't know, you've been hit by a car or something, or what was
by a truck.
Hit by a truck. Oh, so that might be it. So just like the little boy who was hit by a truck later on. But you come in and then you die, and then immediately are able to connect with the main character, the doctor, who kind of like a precursor to the Jack Nicholson character in Shining a little bit. Someone who goes a little crazy, right, over this thing. But yeah, what do you remember being not the motivation, but what was it about Victor needing to warn this family? How was that?
The doctor tried to save my life.
That was it. So someone showed empathy, and
he tried to save me, and he couldn't do it. And then I die right there on the table, and then suddenly I'm awake again. I grab him and I say, "I'll come to you."
Yeah.
Say, beware, because there are evil forces around.
Right.
And it's like I could see what is coming.
Yeah.
And And so I told him, I'll come to you, and I do. I
Yeah, and
come
what's
to you.
great about that movie that was so delightful was that, back in 86, 87, you're having a major motion film being directed by a woman, and that was not happening at the
Yes,
time,
a horror
especially
movie,
a horror movie. That's just
right?
so it's kind of fun that you and I both come from a world that's predominantly male, the horror
Yeah.
genre,
Uh-huh.
and yet we both worked with these wonderful female writer directors who, like, with, in your case, Jane Jensen, with Gabriel Knight, in my case, Lorelei Shannon, who wrote Phantasm 2, and then of course your director for Pet Cemetery. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
Mary
neat
Lambert. Yeah,
to have
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, okay, so I'm gonna so then a few years go by, and you end so 94, I think, is around the time you do Gabriel Night. How does that come along? And when they presented this idea of a full motion video game, what was your thinking at the time? Was this a
Well, that
exciting
was
adventure for you? Did you feel like it was a step
it was
down
a
or what?
brand new thing. I didn't know what to think of it, and uh I had just moved to LA. Um so because the I none of us from Pet Cemetery, none of the actors got any sort of bump from that.
Really? You didn't all of a sudden have the
No,
offers didn't come in.
it was a big movie, made a lot of money on its initial release. It was very popular, but the reviews were very mixed, because horror movies were still very much looked down on, you know. Um, and it was very difficult for the critics to take these things seriously. That was part of it.
Yeah.
So some reviews were really great, and some were kind of mixed about, it's kind of a silly horror movie, stuff like that. Um, uh, but it's one of those movies that really kind of moved the genre forward in spite of that. But none of us got a bump from it. None of us got work coming out of Pet Cemetery, right? Which is kind of crazy.
It is.
These days, the movie is so popular. I go to these signing conventions and sign autographs, and people are just crazy about it because they all saw it when they were kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's more popular now than it was, right after the initial release. And then it just kind of disappeared for a long time. And it was just a job.
Yep.
So then, I was still living in New York, but there was a boycott of New York from the LA producers because they wanted tax breaks, and New York was saying no. So there were only 4 TV shows shooting in New York, and I did the ones I could, Law and Order and something else. Oh, I did an episode of Monsters. That show, that was fun. But there wasn't much work. And at that time in the mid 80s, there were cuts to the humanities, the government cuts, and so a lot of theaters closed, and there was just no work. So my wife and I moved to LA, and Gabriel Night was one of the first. It wasn't the first job. The first job I got was a TV movie called The Yearling, and I got it right away, and that's a really good movie, actually, a TV movie. And then Gabriel Knight was in there somewhere. I needed some money, and I thought, well, it sounds interesting. Let's give this a try. But I didn't know much about that, or I'd done some blue screen work on Pet Cemetery, of course. So I thought, okay, I can do some of this. So that's how it came about.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was a good experience. It was fun. It was just very strange. It was very new because everything was still blue screen then. Maybe that was green screen. I don't know.
No, it's blue screen. Let me show you, if I can, I'm going to show you a photo. I don't have much, but there was a backstage photo that I was able to get a hold of. There's you and Joanne Takahashi, who was your co-star, and that she was the co-lead with Dean Erickson.
Yeah.
And so here you guys are in just a big blue room, and you've got cameras and monitors, and clearly you're prepping for your
yeah. How in the world did you find these pictures? Holy cow.
I have a partner, his name is Daniel, and he is a game developer out of Israel, and he has a incredible knowledge of all games FMV. So I'm like you, I am I'm an actor. I didn't play these games. I never played my game ever. So what I did was, last year, when COVID hit, it just so happened to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the making of Phantas 2. And so I'd been getting a lot of, it's sort of like Pet Sematary. It's found this life online. There's a lot of live streamers that will play games, and they have an audience that watches them play games. And so this game has found its own little cult following. People that played it when they were teenagers, they have a real fondness for it. And it did, push the boundaries in some ways. It dealt with certain themes that no game had done in terms of like acceptance of homosexuality and other, more kink oriented lifestyles. It has a whole bunch of stuff in there beyond the horror. And so it's found this calling. So anyways, I just decided I would reach out to as many people as I could who made the game, because I hadn't talked to anybody. I never played it. I hadn't seen any of the. So I just decided I would go online because I was stuck at home anyways, and I would just interview the director and sort of threw it out there on YouTube, and it's found this. It's not a huge following, but so ultimately I created this little channel that was to create an oral history of the game. And then when we finished that, it was just kind of fun. So now I'm reaching out to people like you, and I'm starting to play these games for the first time. So my partner Daniel, who reached out to me when this first happened, because he knows the game and loves this game so much, he's like a sleuth. He can find anything that you ask him to. So yeah, he's been helping me, and we've been, playing. I actually played my game for the first time ever, and that was weird and crazy. And then we played Gabriel Night too, and so it's been really, really fun. So I got a chance to watch, and you're right. I would never have been able to get through the game on my own. There's a gamer, mentality that I don't have, all the little puzzles and things to get out of a room or what have you. So yeah,
I could never get out of a room.
So I ended up, and I ended up talking to Jane Jensen, who directed and wrote and directed it. And so, yeah, it was really fun. And your performance is great. And,
Thanks.
But yeah, so
I don't remember much of the performance other than the conducting, because that's the part I was really looking forward to. But everything else I don't remember.
My understanding was that, they actually, do you remember going to the Seattle Symphony and performing and sort of, wasn't this opera, or were you in the same room as the opera, or did they cut to you later?
No, that was all blue screen stuff.
Oh, okay, because they actually got opera singers and everything to create this Wagnerian, lost masterpiece. So you weren't there when they did the actual.
I don't even think I had music. I just had to conduct and just make these gestures and.
Oh, that's fine. I wish I had known, because I don't have time to do it. But I could show you a version of. I could show you what that scene looks like.
Man.
So wow. Maybe I can find it before we go here. But so this leads to Phantasmagoria. So this is the story I've been wanting to hear forever. And I have I think I'm going to let you tell your story first, and then I want to share with you how I learned about you.
Yeah.
Because I've known ever since whenever I got cast in the part, I knew they had lost somebody. I was living in Seattle. And so they had done because they were filming up here in Seattle. So I know they had cast almost the entire part, some local actors, but mostly in supporting roles. And then they had gone to LA for other roles. So I get this call from my agent saying, "You want to go in?" I had a couple of theater gigs lined up that I was excited about, so I wasn't all that into it. But I went in anyways, and it was the fastest audition I'd ever been through. It's like, "You're great, go. We need you. You need to start in a month." And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it because, like you said, I didn't know what this format was and how it was going to work. But I ended up doing it. But I had remembered that and remember asking, well, what happened to the guy that didn't do it? And all I remember at one point was and I didn't see this until just recently, and I'll share it with you. They showed me your headshot, and the headshot that they showed me was this. And so when I saw it recently, it was one of those moments like, that's the guy. So this was the one I think you were using.
Oh yes, yeah, great
back.
shot, isn't it?
It's a great shot. I love it. So that I remember just seeing that shot and going, "Oh, okay, I can totally see him playing Curtis Craig," and but yet you didn't. And so now tell us this story.
Well, this is one of those. It's just a nasty Hollywood story, quite frankly.
Conversations with Curtis is brought to you by our Patreon members. Without them, we simply could not be doing what we're doing. If you like what we're doing and would like to see more, please consider joining our Patreon family. There's all kinds of perks and rewards, and we sure would love your company. So please consider. And now, back to the show.
I remember auditioning for it in early fall, maybe late summer, something like that, because it was going to shoot in the fall of whatever year that was. And there were a number of guys. I mean, in the final callback, there were a number of guys, myself and many others, up for that role. And the auditioning was great fun. It was a nice group of people. I remember that, a very nice, respectful, and pleasant group of people. And I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to. I thought this would be so much fun. But then I don't know what happened, but it got bumped to spring, pilot season.
Oh, right.
Right. And I was with a new agency because my agent in Los Angeles, I had to leave him after like 8 months because there was nothing. I got one job and then there were no auditions, nothing. I was getting nothing. And I managed to move from a boutique agency to a much larger agency. Okay. It was the kind of agency that had, there were like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 agents for the actors and then a whole literary department and blah, blah, blah. It was a big, big place.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't know was that the head of the agency pitted the agents against each other. In other words, agent A, this month you made such and such amount of money. You guys didn't make so much money, and I'm going to fire whoever is coming in lowest.
Oh, they're playing
next
that
month. So constantly they had to fight against each other to make,
swimming with sharks, right?
Yes, and I didn't know this at the time. So my each of us had an agent that we would report to, but all the agents worked for everybody. The agent I was reporting to was like, no, I need you here for pilot season. I can't have you going off to do this video game. And the other agent was like doing all these, getting the deal much more, like getting a lot more money for me, and he really wanted me to do it. And my other agent was saying, no, you need to be here for pilot season. I can't risk you not being here, right? And that's how it all happened. And so there were a number of projects. By the time that this decision had to be made, there were a number of projects that I was in consideration for.
Yeah.
So I took that gamble, right? And I said no to the video game because a pilot would simply pay much more money and be much more exposure, So in the end, I didn't work at all that whole time.
Oh,
you were
man.
up there shooting. Every project just fell through. And
this business, man, this business drives me crazy sometimes, right?
Yes, and I've always regretted that. And then later, I've realized, oh, that's what was going on, because I came from a smaller agency where everybody worked together, right, to book the job, right? And then when people started telling me, yes, though they get pitted against each other and they're vicious, and I thought, okay, there's the core of this apple is rotten. And so as soon as I had the chance, I jumped ship from that agency, and in great part because of that fight. Nobody was being honest with me. You see what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And
And
I
that's
often
one of
think
those
about,
big regrets, because I was so excited about doing the project, the game, but you know, they as it all happened. I mean, nobody could read the future, but as it all happened, I just spent the whole pilot season and the whole time you were shooting, I was unemployed.
isn't that something? Isn't that something? That's your agent at the poker table again, just playing with your career
Yes, but
essentially.
that agent was, that was a different agent
No, so
altogether.
I'm just saying that
Yeah,
metaphorically, that's what our
yeah,
agents do is they play,
yes.
they
But
get,
I realized something that, you know, ultimately it's our career.
yeah,
We call the shots.
yeah,
We take advice, but it's our responsibility. And that was a big learning experience, because I was very, very disappointed that
yeah.
I chose the way I did. And even if I had gotten a pilot, I don't know if that would have been better. Because I was really jazzed about doing the video game, because it sounded so cool. It
Yeah.
sounded so much
It,
fun.
it was really cool. I mean, it was one of those things where, your story with Pet Cemetery, it didn't go anywhere. It ultimately, that genre of game ultimately was too expensive to produce at that time, because
Mhm.
now they're making these amazing interactive fiction games that are, the more I'm kind of being dragged into this world of gaming, the more I'm blown away at some of the things they're doing now. There's a couple of there's a game maker named Sam Barlow. I just interviewed him, and he's creating these incredible FMV games that they're like movies, and you are absolutely taking charge, and not just like go in this door or this door. You are actually making decisions and piecing together stories. It's fascinating. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they didn't have the skills to do that
right.
back
No,
then,
yeah,
or not. They had the skills, but they didn't have the tools.
yeah.
Um, so there was a short period where they made a bunch of these games. It looked like it was going to be the next big thing, and I remember being, on the cover of the calendar section or one of my an image from the game. But yeah, it just never went anywhere. And so I moved down to LA thinking this is my shot. And I got my share of one-liners and things like that, but
Mhm.
it never quite took off. So, anyways, that
Mhm.
said, you would have had a great time, and who knows, it may have been different for you, but it didn't really take
No,
off
I'm
in
sure
Hollywood.
those things, it was a niche thing, and they wouldn't, it's not something that helped your career, except that it was a chunk of work, which meant a chunk of money, which meant you didn't have to sweat for a few months after
Yeah,
doing
exactly. And that was the biggest. I don't think I got anywhere the deal that your good agent was working for you, but it sure kept me out of unloading trucks for a couple of years. So that
it.
was nice.
I mean, this is something that the general public doesn't realize, that, actors, we take jobs, a lot of jobs we take just so that we can survive.
Yeah, keep doing the work,
Even
right?
stars do
Yeah.
this,
Oh
because the
yeah.
money's gone, they're dealing with much larger amounts of money, but it goes,
Yeah.
there's no security, and you never know when you're going to work again,
Yeah, totally.
so these money
Well,
jobs are important,
well, I want to share with you. I think you'll get a kick out of this. So when I was playing Gabriel Night 2 and I'm gonna show you a little. We live streamed it, so we had maybe 50, 60 people watching it live, and it's gotten a lot of views since then. People like to watch other people play video games. So I'm playing with my partner Daniel, and you'll see him in a second. And this is the very last, the last our last episode. So we get to the final end, and at this point, Daniel knows that I know that I wasn't the first choice for Curtis, and that I kind of had a vague recollection of what I told you. Like I knew somebody had dropped out. So he surprised me with a little video prior to us playing the last part of the game. So I'm going to share this with you. It's going to be a little meta because you're going to watch me in one window talking to him. You and I will be in another window, and you'll see somebody that you recognize as well. So let me set this up really quick and get this going. I have to move this over here. Make sure you can see everything. And hopefully you'll be able to hear everything too. Let me set this up. So it's about 4 minutes, but I think you'll get a kick out of it. So this is him showing me or sharing, revealing to me the identity of the original Curtis Craig. Let me just make sure everything's good. Yep, everything's good. You can see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so let me start this. So you might hear a couple of weird little sound bites, and it's widgets that happen when some of the fans are commenting or what have you. But for the most part, this should.
Say again, who are these people?
So this is me right here. That's me.
Yes.
And then this is my partner Daniel. He's a game developer from Israel, and he's the one who found the backstage pictures, and he created this little video that I'm seeing for the very first time. So you're going to watch my reaction, and we get to watch your reaction too. So this will be fun. Here we go. Graham.
If any spirits are attached to you, this will pull them out.
Would you like to adopt another child?
I know this guy.
This one.
In addition to this one.
Yeah, he's
old, adorable. He's white though.
He's the guy. He's the Wagner guy.
You did put a pair of eyes in Nikki Serrano, didn't you, Dennis?
Yes, sir. I fixed her up real nice.
Man, he's good. I fixed her up real nice. Yeah, it's totally the Wagner guy. It's the Wagner guy. Is it the Wagner guy?
Yep.
What are you doing here? The museum is closed.
They always like to have a
Wait, is there still? Oh, wait, is there more?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
You can pause here for a bit.
Okay.
So basically, this is Brad Greenquist, who played Georg in the game, as we can see here. And we'll meet his character today again in today's episode. But all of the clips I shared are from parts he got after Gabriel Night 2. So let's watch a clip from a movie he did before Gabriel Night.
Oh, wow, cool. Yeah, none of this stuff is going to make it in our recording. This is all going to get
it's going to make it in our recording. Each segment was less than 10 seconds.
Oh, I see. You're trying to work the system. Here we go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a good job for me. I can soak in the atmosphere of the maestro while I compose.
Great dialect, by the way. Pet Sematary. Oh my god.
Okay, you can pause here.
Oh my gosh. That was great. His ear was hanging out.
It's nothing we haven't seen in Phantasmagoria. Anyway, in Pet Sematary, Brad Greenquist plays a college student who gets hit by a car at the beginning of the movie and then haunts the main character, but that's another thing. Okay?
All right. Keep going.
So that's all you need to know about the character. You can keep playing.
Okay. Well, now I maintain, and I'm 99.9% sure that you had cast a Curtis. Do you remember that? Do you remember the other actor that was originally cast before? Okay, I'm going to stop Brad and talk to you. This is where it gets too meta for me, but I'm interviewing. This is an interview I did with Lorelei Shannon a few months back. Lorelei was the writer of Phantasmagoria 2. And so in this interview that Daniel put together, I asked her who was the original person, and she couldn't remember. So you're going to watch her try to remember who you were. Dropped out or something?
Well, we had been talking to, and this is horrible because his name is dropped straight out of my head.
I remembered that I was not their first choice, that they had cast someone else. And then that person dropped out, and then they kind of were quickly trying to cast the part. And that's how I ended up getting it. I've never known who that person was. I remember seeing his headshot at one point, and I'm seeing what Daniel is doing here, and this is blowing my mind.
It just dropped straight out of my head. But the actor who played the college student who's hit by a car at the start of Pet Sematary.
Holy crap!
And yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which
I had
was
no
cool.
idea who
And
he was
I
when
don't
she
think we had
mentioned
actually
that.
signed him. We had been talking to him, and then he had another commitment.
Or not.
But I'm so glad we got you. You were fantastic.
Oh, I think I was trying to write it down. I'm wondering why I'm looking down. I was trying to write his name.
Wait a second.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you're kidding me.
Moral of the story.
Okay.
We've got places to go.
Okay, so that is me. I had to play I had to play the evil spirit of myself and all that. And so and the funny thing is, Brad, when I watched the game, your movie the other night, you had to wear those milky contact lenses.
Yeah.
And I have the same things. They were a pain. You
God.
couldn't see a thing out of them.
Right. I know they're hard to deal with, right?
So look at that. There's the two, the dueling Curtises.
That's
right there.
hilarious. That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Oh my God.
Let me see what this final thing is here. Yep, the original Curtis pick. This has got to go into Dimension Next. Unbelievable. So there we go. Thought you'd get a kick out of that.
That's amazing. Holy cow. Your pal Daniel is a magician.
He is. He absolutely is.
Wow.
It's so great.
That was great. Wow. I'm still sad that I didn't do it.
I'm not. I'm thrilled you didn't do it.
I'm glad that you got it. I'm glad it was a good experience for you.
It was great.
Yeah.
It's funny. I want to before we go. There's something that I think about a lot, and I would love to just hear your thoughts about this, just as a fellow journeyman traveler in this world of acting, and I think about, as I've been looking at your situation, in your career, you start off with these big projects. You get the almost the Broadway show. You get these major parts in these major films early on. You're not even 30. I can only imagine at that age, if it was me, I'd be thinking, there's a pretty good chance I'm on my way to the next level, that I'm going to go into, who's a good example of that, like a Anthony Edwards or, the people who are starting to really, hit it at that time.
Right.
And then, as you said, it didn't take, and it obviously has nothing to do with talent. I can tell you're an incredibly talented actor. And we probably both know more amazing actors than we can count that ultimately didn't follow through or didn't get to where they needed to go. I count myself as one of those. But you've since had this incredibly consistent career that has kept you active. You do theater, you're in film and TV, you teach. At what point, I guess my question, Brad, is, was there a sense of disappointment along the way that it didn't go bigger? Or were you always happy to be along for the ride? I guess, I'm just kind of curious about what your original goals were and all that.
Yeah. It was, yes, it was disappointing, but what can one do? You can either leave the business, which these sorts of things do knock people out.
Absolutely.
Because the disappointment is so hard, like, for example, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I was the first choice.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
But one producer said no because I didn't have a big enough name.
Right.
And that's when they went with James Spader. Huge, just a crushing disappointment, because I loved the script and nobody else liked the script, by the way. Nobody. It was like really like, oh, this is awful. But I was like, oh my God, this is a great movie. And that was a huge disappointment and a crushing disappointment when, it went to Cannes and James
Oh.
Spader won Best
Yeah.
Actor, and he
Oh,
deserved
yeah.
it. He was really, really good. That, you know, but you kind of make a career of big disappointments. The way I dealt with it throughout my career, throughout my youth anyway, was I would simply go into mourning. I learned to not carry it around with me. So I would spend 3 days dressed all in black, basically stayed in bed. I would only go out to eat. And then after 3 days, you get pretty bored, feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And during that time, I would be like, okay, you cannot leave the business today. Tomorrow morning, you can leave the business if you want, but you cannot today. Stay in it today. But tomorrow,
Yeah.
if you want to, when you're thinking clearly in the morning, call your agents and you just say, I'm done.
Yeah.
Next morning, you know, going to give it one more day. See,
You got an audition tomorrow. You might as well check it out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good strategy for dealing with that, because this really does just crush people. It's
Yeah.
very hard. So yes, that was disappointing on the one hand. On the other hand, there are many, many actors who've had this kind of success and greater, and then it all stops. It all just stops.
Oh, big
entirely.
time, big time. And also, you know, the consistency that you've shown, you know, throughout is remarkable. And being able to, yeah, I think there's a certain point where it's not about accepting. It's not about acceptance. I don't think it's about, does this still bring me joy? Does creating something, even if it's a small character part or a supporting role or what have you, we all have the Hamlets in us, but how much joy do you get out of creating these moments? And if that's still fueling you, then you're
Yes, you know, it's like every job is a challenge, of course. Some jobs you just do because you need the money or you need the health insurance.
Yeah, right.
Health insurance is a big thing.
Yeah.
And so you just do them and you go into it because it's somebody's, you may not think it's the greatest project, but for somebody on that production, it is the greatest project. It's their project.
Absolutely.
So
and there are people that look at your career. You might, you know, I've had this happen to me a lot where maybe I have, sometimes I think, oh, I didn't quite get to the levels that I had hoped to get to. But then there are people who look at the career that I have and they look up to that. And I, you know, I look at what you've done. And so it's always by degrees, isn't it? There's always somebody.
Very much so, yes. And, you know, looking back on it all, I mean, I've worked with some amazing people. I mean, I got to work with George C. Scott for 5 weeks. George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon on the same project. And I was sitting with George for 3 weeks in the courtroom. You know, how can you,
yeah,
you know, it's amazing. And many, many wonderful people. I've done 2 movies with Will Smith. These, you know, and that it's not just because they're big stars, they're creative people who are very, 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 very good at this craft.
Yeah.
You know, and you just learn so much from them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I've worked with a number of wonderful directors, wonderful cinematographers, wonderful camera operators.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful costumers. I mean,
well, and what you've also done, Brad, which I really appreciate, is you've taken all of this learning, because you seem to me to be someone who never tires of gathering information and learning it, and but you're giving it back and you're teaching and
yes,
you have and I love that you've you know focused some of your energy towards giving back to people what was given to you along the way, right?
Yes, because I had to learn, like I said earlier, I had to learn everything. I could not have done this without teachers because I had no natural talent. So the teachers in my life, the instructors, were all vital for me. So I started teaching after the 9/11 attacks because there was no work, and I had two small children. You know, they were 2, 3 years old, and my wife was working, but it wasn't enough. And we needed money, and there was no, you know, everything was shut down for like 6 months, something like that. And so I figured out a way to start teaching, and then that just took off because I was very good at it because I had to learn everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and now it's like it's a thriving business. I'm in my studio right now. I have this little studio in Santa Monica, and 3 classes a week full. It's always full with long waiting lists. And
Oh, that's so great, Brad. That's fantastic.
It's
Yeah.
good. It's good to help people because
Yeah.
there's not really, it's all about film acting, and nobody really teaches it. Nobody teaches all these tiny, tiny little things. There are film acting classes, but those are mostly they are just recording a theater performance, and that isn't it. What are the shots? What shot are you in, and how do you use that shot to your advantage?
Totally. Yeah.
You don't have to act. You know, that's basically what it's all about. How can you use everything around you so that you have to do as little as possible and as easily as possible? And then in turn, I learn a lot.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
teaching. So yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to do, to give back. Yes.
And then you're in rehearsal now for a play, yeah? Or
yes,
something?
I'm wrapping up one play. I've been doing this amazingly successful play, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Oh, wow.
Play that was based on the movie, but the play script is really, really good. And I've been doing it at the Ruskin Group Theater here in Santa Monica. And every performance I've done, I missed some performances because I had to go do some things out of town and I had to cover them. But every performance I've done has been sold out, and everyone has gotten a huge standing ovation. Like,
Oh, that's great. Oh, it's a great
standing ovation.
I think that show in this time, unfortunately and unfortunately, it was created a long time ago, and we should be a little bit beyond that at this point.
We should be, yes, but
really we're not, and we actually seem to have stepped back a little bit over the last year or so in many ways. So to bring that play out again has a whole new, to bring more life to that and to that story and that theme of acceptance, accepting things you're uncomfortable with, accepting different, cultures and what have you, is very important. I think that's Oh, and what a great role! You get to play the Spencer Tracy guy, right?
Yeah.
That's
great. It's so much fun, and so we're wrapping that up on Labor Day weekend. Today is my first rehearsal for another play that I'm doing at the Pacific Resident Theater Company. It's a company I belong to. A little
Paul Barnes isn't there anymore, is he? Is he still around? Is that PCPA?
No.
Oh, okay. I was thinking that's up north. Okay, never mind.
I'm doing some this little Edward Albee one act called Fam and Yam.
Oh, wow. Okay, fantastic. When I was in LA for 4 years, I was one of the Circle X theaters down there. I'm not sure if you know of them. They're
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they've been around. They've been sort of part of that equity waiver. Yes. I don't even know if that's equity waiver even exists anymore, but they were a small sort of independent artsy theater company that I got involved with when I was down there for a while. So I wasn't sure if you knew anybody. But well, Brad, you have to do your rehearsal, so I got to let you go. But hey, thank you so much for taking the time. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, Paul. This was terrific. It's really great to meet you, and we need to stay in touch. Okay?
I would love that. And in the meantime, I will give you. I'll stay in touch, and I'll let you know when we drop this video so people can watch it. And
great.
But in the meantime, all the best to you and your family, and
thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Great.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Paul. Bye.
Well, that was fun, right? What a really cool guy. Boy, I had a great time watching his reaction to my reaction of finding out that he was Curtis Craig. Is really neat. And I hope you enjoyed that. I got a sense that he did. So there you go. Another conversation with Curtis in the vault. And I look forward to sharing the next one with you. And the only reason I can share any of these interviews with you is because of my Patreon members. If it weren't for my Patreon folks, we could not be doing Conversations with Curtis at all, and we could use as much support as we could get. So now is the time. If you're liking these interviews, if you like what we're doing, I feel like we're doing something really unique and even important, if I dare to dream a little bit. I think what we're doing in terms of creating these oral histories of these beloved video games and the people who made them, no one else is doing this in quite this way. So please help us grow. Please help us continue. And please join our Patreon family right now. I think you'll be glad that you did. And stay as long as you can. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And we will see you on the next Conversation with Curtis. Bye-bye.